Hi guys, welcome to my channel. I wanted to get in here and do this video, and I actually did it yesterday, but I just realized that the background noise and everything was too much, so I just decided to redo it. So guys, I want to just talk about a video that this video basically is going to be talking about the importance of not putting your children against each other, pitting your children against one another. This is something that parents can do, some intentionally and some unintentionally. And I want to let you know that as parents, we are given stewardship. Sometimes people, when they have children, they don't see them as individuals. They don't see them as worthy of respect. They just see children as I say, like farm hands to help. They're there to make your life better, make your life easier once they get older. They're there to, you want them to work and bring in money to you. And it's almost as if, you deserve. Some parents will think that after all I've done, I brought you in this world, you're going to do for me. But I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but you did not bring your children into the world. Your children were handpicked and placed in your womb, placed in your loins, men, and in your womb, women, to bring the child forth. Jeremiah speaks of, in the book of Jeremiah, God says, before I placed you in your mother's womb, I knew you. And so therefore, before we are placed in our parents' womb, placed in our mother's womb, before we come from the loins of our father, God knew us. Okay. And so children are not pawns, and children are not there for you to abuse and enslave, and it's like they owe you a debt. You become a loan shark as a parent. So everything is accounted for. I gave you this, you give me that. It's really bad. And so one of the things that can happen is where parents are causing their children to be fighting against each other, and there's conflict for the parents' approval, and it's a very unhealthy thing. It could be a mother or father that does this, comparing the sons, comparing the daughters, ridiculing one, putting down one while lifting up the other one, praising one, comparing them, saying to them, why can't you be more like your brother? Why can't you be more like your sister? Just making references that is really unfair, things that they cannot change about their body, about their features, about their looks. There may be, let's say, a father who was an athlete or who was or is a doctor or something like that, and his son, he has one son who's following in his footsteps, whether being an athlete or you know being in the medical profession or whatever it may be. This child just seems to have all they have and share a lot of the same commonalities and similarities. And so the father may draw more to that son. And then he may have a son who's completely opposite, who has completely different interests. And he may begin to form an alliance with the son that he prefers. And it's them against the son. And he cannot accept the son. Why can't you do this? Why aren't you smart? Why aren't you like this? Why are you short? Because as you notice, people who have children, very rarely do they all come out looking exactly the same features, same abilities. It happens sometimes, but you notice there'll be differences in them. Sometimes one just looks different from the other. And, this is where they come in with the first child, then someone came in with the middle child, and then the baby. And as they said, the middle child supposedly is the one that, they're not the oldest, they're not the youngest. So if you're the middle child, this is a bad thing. But there's no middle child. This is your only child, in the sense of that's your second born, and that's the only second born you would have had. You have your last one, that's meaning, how do I put this? It's not about putting them in this number system, but the fact that they're unique. That child that you created is unique. There's no other child like that one. Their DNA and everything about that child is unique. So it's not that this is my second born and this is my baby and this is the oldest, which they are. Yes, they came in a certain order, but they're unique and they are special. But sometimes there are parents who will play that game. You have mothers that do that. They'll play their daughters against each other. All right? So there's one daughter they favor, then another one that they don't like. And sometimes the mother does not treat either daughters right. it could be the same for the father. And so there's this need, but he creates, or she, the mother, creates an environment where the children are constantly fighting for his affection, his approval, his love, acceptance. The same thing for the mother. And so going back to the mom, there might be a daughter she prefers more. They share more in common. They have the same interest. The other is different. And so they consider different to mean you can't sit with us. And what will happen is sometimes the parents can play the children against each other by poisoning the mind of that child against their sibling. And it's easy to do because when children are living in the household, the parents have a great deal of authority. They have the authority to make or break you. They have the power to do that. Okay? To reward or punish. To withhold love. Okay? To deny you love or affection. They can do that. And so sometimes the children will be hungry for that because children are born with what they call a filial love. The child comes in the world full of love and loyalty and trust completely for that parent. And so that can be played on. Now that filial love can end up being destroyed depending on the parenting, the things that they do coming up, and how the parent behaves. Because the child will love the parent no matter what. A baby, if the parent hurts them, they're still going to love the parent the very next day. It's like they forget about everything and they keep going and going, but there'll be something that the parent will continue to do or withhold from the child, where at some point in the formative years of that child, that love and that affection and everything can be completely depleted. If the love, there's some things that children come in the world with a clean canvas. And so depending on depending on the environment and how they are raised, they will either grow up to be like brute beast, mean, because that's the canvas, that's how they were painted, or they can grow up being in a supporting and loving environment. Well, sometimes you have parents who will create an environment where the filial love for the child is used in a way the parent knows that the child really cares and wants the approval, and what they say matters, and they can cause them to be divided, all right, for whatever reason the parent does it. Sometimes a parent just doesn't like their child for some reason, and so they want that child to feel alienated, and they will treat the children different. So let's say they have several children. There's one child that will be the black sheep. There's another, could go either way. And then there's another one who's like the golden child. Or they may have 2 or 3 that they treat so well, they make sure they get everything they need, but there's just one that's like, what they call the runt. When animals have a child, there'll be one they'll reject. The parent will do that to this child for whatever reason. There's some parents that dislike a specific child. Let's say they were never married. The mother was never married to the father, or vice, the father never married the mother, or there's a divorce. The child is growing up and is looking like the parent. So whether the daughter is looking more and more like the mother, or the son is looking more and more like the father who's no longer in their life, the mother would dislike that son because he looks just like his father. That he has a face of his father, he has the expression and ways of the father, and she will dislike him, not able to decipher and see that this is not the father, this is your son. Then there are fathers who will mistreat their daughter because she looks like the mother, and he hates the mother, and she has mannerisms like the mother, and sometimes that father will be attacking that daughter and making comparisons. You're like your mother, you're this and you're that, and really attacking her. And so he may prefer another daughter compared, versus this one, and make her feel left out. It's easy to separate children, especially when they're young and impressionable, and if they're getting more favor. So when the children are being treated differently in the household, they're not able to come together and really be able to unite and say, yeah, I'm being treated this way, because the child that's being mistreated, they can't go and talk to the other sibling that's being treated well, They can't relate. So that child will always be able to see the good things about the mom or dad, and they're going to say, no, you don't have it right. It must be something you're doing, or you're just thinking that way. You're just being negative because they're being treated well. You see? And so there'll be parents that will do that because they don't want the children to be able to come together, because there has to be a difference. That's how, in slavery, that's how some of the things slave masters did. There'll be they'll take one slave and give them more privilege than the others. And that slave will feel like they're really something, right? Because maybe they're eating better. They may have a better slave quarters, nonetheless, still slave quarters. They will allow them to ride on the horse, and they're not doing as much work as the other slaves. And their job is to look and see what the other slaves are doing and report it to the slave master, or even discipline them. And how does that happen? They're able to use a slave to do that, even though he is still a slave. He doesn't realize he's being used, but by treating one better, then you control the others. And so that's what some parents will do. So they'll treat their children different to be able to, so that they can't really come together, and then there'll always be division between the children. And this is a bad thing. Parents don't realize they're parents who are not only those who are not Christians or not saved, but those who are saved that are doing this. And what makes it worse, they go to church and they're praising God and they're doing the most in the community, but they are terrible parents at home. And they're playing their children against one another. And what parents need to realize, there's so many people who say that they're believers in the Lord, parents, that they're horrible parents, and they do all this religious stuff and not realizing that when they stand before God, the Lord is going to ask them about their stewardship of their children, even as they become adults. Not that the parents are over the children as they become adults, but the result and the way the children went. Granted, those children will still be responsible for their own actions as adults, but the parents will be held accountable. And parents don't realize that. I feel many parents don't realize that. They will feel like them having children is like the Lord giving them some cattle and giving them some slaves or some housekeepers that they can now make my life easier, and you guys owe me. But the Bible says that parents are supposed to be given to their children's children, which tells me right there, our job doesn't really end once we raise our children. Sometimes it may not be money. You may not have the money or things or inheritance to give your children, but it could be love. It could be affection. It could be support. It could be just other things that you can do, being able to counsel and make your grandchildren smile and or whatever it may be. And others, you're able to give an inheritance to them. You're able to have money and things that you set aside. You have bonds, saving bonds. You have an IRA. You have a little acorn funding and some things set aside for your children. And you may have some property and stuff like that. Nevertheless, what parents need to understand is that when you separate and divide your children and you have them going against one another and competing and making comparisons between your children's children, because it doesn't just end with the children. Once the children get older, now the parent is preferring this child's children. Now the parent continues the poison, where because there was division, once those siblings have their own kids, there's going to continue to be competition and division that way. So what happens is not only will the parents divide their children in their household, but they're also dividing generations to come. And this is where the wrath of God is going to kick in. When parents think they're just playing their daughters against each other, or the sons versus the daughters versus the sons, all these things, and they cause this division and competition and disharmony, they're not realizing not only does it affect them, but it affects the generations that's going to come through those children. Because the children will have that same behavior. Cousins competing, making comparisons, who's doing better, who's not, who's talented, who's not, who's doing this versus who's doing that. All of this to get the approval of the puppeteer at the top of all this mess, which would have been that parent or parents. God created each and every one of us unique. You may all be medical professionals, but it doesn't mean that this child will be. And if they're not, like the other child, does not mean that something is wrong with them. But you find in many cultures that could be the issue. This is what you're going to be, this is what you're going to do, and the child just follows this, and then they end up being unhappy and miserable, and sometimes even committing suicide. Because they're on this hamster wheel just following what this has been our tradition and our standard. But that's another video. I'm just here to talk to parents about that. To talk about the fact that when you play your children against one another, it's very damaging. Sometimes it could be you treat the sons better than you treat the daughters. It may be you treat the daughters better than you treat the sons. Maybe you're not fair. Maybe you're not impartial and equal with your children. And children can pick up on that. And it's really important. If sometimes it can happen intentionally, other times not intentionally. Sometimes what happens is you can get upset with your child, and then as you're chastising them, you're comparing them to the other sibling. Why can't you do like your brother? Why can't you do like your sister? Why can't you do like this and that and that and that? And it's something that's easy that can come from a child, from a parent's mouth without meaning it, but you have to be wise and think of what you're saying. Well, he's not his sister. She's not her brother. They're two different individuals. And if you make the brother or the sister the standard of behavior, it can cause resentment between the siblings. You have to realize that we have to learn to tailor our chastisements and to curb our anger, because if you speak in anger, you'll say things that you can't take back, even if you say that you're sorry. So the decision, the thing is not to compare them to their siblings or to somebody else's child, but why is it that you're doing what you're doing? You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? It's easy to say, why can't you be like this person or that person? But that's harmful, and it plants seeds and it hurts your child. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't be held to the standard of doing better. Yes, there need to be disciplines. There needs to be ways, but we have to pray and ask God to show us and to help us to how to chastise them without damaging them. And being willing to apologize if you've said too much, but you shouldn't always be apologizing for damaging words. Rather, curb your anger. Stop. I always say, if you're chastising your children, correcting them in a rage and anger, you're going to do a lot of damage. And you may do damage physically, and you may do it spiritually and mentally and emotionally. And those seeds are hard to take back. It's also important to just talk to your children and sit them down. Find out what's going on. Hey, what you had to tell me? Do you have anything to talk about? Anything on your mind? Is there anything that's happened that's been upsetting that you haven't told me? Some parents may think that's weird. Some people, depending on your culture, who does that? But you will be surprised all the things that your children may be holding inside, or the way that they're perceiving things that's completely a misunderstanding. And you get to sit and talk to them. Sitting with them alone, not in front of everybody. Having time for your sons, your daughters, learning them. And you'll find how something you said, they thought it was something else. And what happens a lot, what causes division between family, is that the parents may say and do things, and just because they're the parents, they just say whatever to the child, and the child is left to internalize that pain and those feelings, and the parents never feel like, let me go and check on my child. They just feel like I said what I said, because unfortunately many parents have a God-like mentality. They have a God mentality. I brought you in this world. I'm doing this. I'm providing. I'm doing this. You're not doing any of that. You're not providing that stuff. God gave us the ability to do certain things to provide for our children, but without Him, it would not be possible. I'm not saying that as parents we should not be given honor. I'm not saying that you should allow your children to undermine your authority and what you are doing to provide for them. But it is really important that you don't take on the God mentality, that you say these things to your children, and because they live in your house and all these things, then they owe you, and they can take your disrespect. You're supposed to be able to dish it out. I can insult you. That has nothing to do with anything. They're still individuals. So parents, just be careful. Take time out with your children. Find out what's going on. Now, sometimes, depending on the type of parent you are, if you've been one that's intimidated them, bruised them up, all that stuff, that child will never tell you the truth. You can only ask God to be able to open that door where you can be humble. You can apologize to your child. Understand, apologizing does not mean all discipline goes out the door and they do what they want, but you as a parent should be able to see when you're wrong, because those are good lessons to teach your children, and at some point they can open up and talk to you, and sometimes maybe they won't. But a lot of times we're so busy parenting, and we're so busy doing the next thing, and we're so busy getting this done and that we just think, I'm doing enough. There's food and shelter in here and clothes. Okay, I'm doing the most. But you will be surprised the things that children are going through. You'll be surprised what they're experiencing at school. You'll be surprised what they are thinking. And if they have you to talk to and they can tell you what's going on, through the grace of God, you're able to give them wise counsel, and they feel they can come to you, it's going to make a difference. But again, that's another video. For right now, it's addressing parents who have created division among their seed. Remember, Rebecca did this. She had twins, Jacob and Esau. She was a manipulator. She placed it in the heart of Jacob to steal his brother's birthright. She placed it in she went and manipulated her husband, who was blind. She took advantage of his vulnerability and set everything up and told her son Esau told Jacob exactly what to do in order to deceive the father and steal from his brother. And ironically, Jacob did not say to his mother, Mom, I cannot do that to Jacob. I can't do that to Esau. He's my brother. What Jacob's concern was, if I'm remembering correctly, when she suggested that he get the birthright, his thing was not about his brother. Rather, how will I be able to do that? Because Esau is hairy and I am smooth. You see that? So there had to be something there, in my opinion, because he was willing to do it. And so she filled in the blanks and helped him to be able to do it. And what happened? There was anger. Esau was angry to the point he wanted to kill his brother. What did that mother create? She stirred murderous thoughts in the heart of her son. He must have felt betrayed. He must have felt hurt, and it brought division between the brothers, where because she had heard that Esau was planning to kill his brother, she sent Jacob away. And now the brothers are raised separately. One is hurt, one is rejected, one has lost out on his inheritance from his father. And here's a father who is heartbroken, knowing that he has been deceived. All under the hand of one woman. Now, later on, years later, Jacob and Esau would reconcile. And Jacob was afraid. He thought that Esau would kill him. But Esau at that point had long forgotten about the hurt and the pain, and was replaced sincerely with the love for his brother, and they were reunited again. And those are the things that we want to happen between siblings. Sometimes there's a middle person. They're parents who are not good. They have that title and they abuse their authority, and there's lots of siblings and family that's been broken apart because of this person. Because no one suspects that this mother or this father would lie and deceive. And so they're able to keep the narrative, and based on their love for the parent, they just believe and take their word at face value. That's why parents can really destroy relationships. A mother can turn the children against the father can turn the children against the mother, depending on what is said. Depending on how the tables turn. A lot of times, if there's already a rift between one of the parent, then the parent will then play on that. Okay? So if the sons are not getting along with the father for whatever reason, the mother could come in and really make that worse. If the children are not getting along with the mother, the father could come in and say some things to make that worse. Now, guys, I just want to be clear. I'm not saying, because sometimes if there's a parent that's not doing what they need to do, the parent is harmful, the parent is negligent, the parent is dangerous or indifferent, whatever it may be. Sometimes as parents, you have to sit down with your children and speak to them on what is going on. I did a video a long time ago, well, earlier this year, and it was just talking about why you should not lie to your children. Let's say there's an absent parent or a parent who's not being responsible. You cannot lie to your children. And if the father's not coming or the mother's not picking them up, you cannot lie to the child and make up a story for the parent, because your word must be trusted by your children. You cannot allow an irresponsible parent or parents that choosing not to do their part to cause you to become a liar to your children to protect them. Now, with that, you have to use wisdom and pray and ask God how. It's not that you're going to be telling your child every little thing and dumping negativity on them so they'll think evil of their parent, but how do I explain this to my child without damaging them and without hurting them and without trying to paint their father or their mother as a villain? Okay? So, for example, mom or dad doesn't come to pick you up. All right? You're not going to sit there and say mom had to work or dad had to work. Your word must, your relationship with your child must remain just a clear path. Okay? There must be a level of honesty that they know that you will not try to, even if it was for a good thing, they don't need to know you as a liar or a person that made up stories, because it's going to come back to bite you. But you can say, look, your dad's not coming to pick you up. Your mom's not coming to pick you up. At this point, I can't really explain everything to you as far as what's going on. But when you get older, if this is the right time, we'll be able to talk about those things. But for right now, no, he's not coming. She's not coming. And you try to comfort your child as best as you can. I mean, that's just a general thing, but you may find another way. Just ask God to teach you how, but you don't want to be known as a liar. So anyway, what I'm saying, in those cases where there are cases where you have to sit down and speak to your children, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a parent that sees the parent is not a bad parent. That's not what it is. The parent just want to turn the children against that parent. Okay? So going back to the point, causing your children to be at war against one another for selfish reasons or just to be vindictive or whatever it may be, or you simply prefer the one versus the other, not only affects your children as individuals, but it's going to affect generations to come. And it is a huge, in my opinion, that is it's such a bad thing to do. And it will carry so much consequence. It's going to carry so many ramifications for you as the parent or that parent that did it. They'll stand before God and they'll think that God is just going to talk to them about all the charities and the good things that they did, and they were quiet people and they didn't bother anybody, and they gave these tithes and they did this for the church and they were involved in that, and not knowing that everything's going to go back to your character and the way you treated people. You can't ruin generations. The behavior and the offense and the wicked thing a parent may do against their son not only affects the son, but it's going to affect those that's going to come from his loins. To lie on the son is to lie on his seed and to lie on his generation and his lineage. To mistreat the daughter and to make her feel like she's less than is to condemn and to mistreat those who will come from her womb and those she'll bring forth into the world. And that's not a light thing in the eyes of God. So parents, look in the mirror, check yourself, repent what you need to repent of. Go before God and ask him to help you to change your ways, because that type of manipulation and behavior, it wasn't just, that didn't just happen. That's something that you've been doing from before your child was born, and it came from somewhere. And sometimes what ends up happening, as I said in another video, you keep doing those type of things to your children, you'll find that they all or one will break away from you. And God will allow that child to go elsewhere, start afresh, and cut off all the toxicity that you want to keep bringing down from generation to generation. It's never too late to change. As long as you have breath in your body, you can change. So I hope you consider this message, pray about it, seek God out about it, and take the steps that are necessary to bring reconciliation and healing.